There are jokes you tell behind closed doors. And then there are the ones that change everything. It was a glittering Dallas evening, designer shoes clicking against flagstone, string lights hanging like constellations, and laughter spilling from every corner of the backyard. Jessica, my wife of 7 years, stood at the fire pit like she owned the night, her third glass of sangria held high like a scepter. I mean, come on, she giggled, loud enough to draw half the party's attention. Back in college, I picked Mitchell because he was rich and convenient. He had a car and a future. What more could a girl want? Laughter. Sharp, unthinking, and collective. But it didn't last. 1 second. 2. Then silence. A few awkward chuckles died in the air like bad smoke. Someone coughed. Someone else looked at the grass. That's when her gaze met mine. Eyes wide, like she hadn't expected me to be standing just behind the group. She tried to smile. Oh, babe, come on. It's just a little story. You know, college days. I didn't smile back. Glad to know, I said. Just that. Flat. Measured. I turned to leave, but she stumbled forward, catching my arm with fingers that trembled just slightly. Mitchell, it was a joke. Don't be like this. Like what? I turned to face her fully now, voice still quiet. Like the idiot who just found out he was a 7-year punchline? Don't be dramatic, she hissed through clenched teeth, suddenly aware that people were still watching. It was harmless. Harmless. I took a step closer. Let me get this straight. Marrying me was a convenience. My name on your credit cards, your family's rent, the cars I bought, the tuition I covered. Was that all part of the package? You know I love you, she snapped, eyes flashing. Stop twisting things. No. You love what I provide, I said, voice sharper now. You love not worrying about bills. You love that your brother drives a Mustang I paid for. You love your parents living rent-free in a house I signed for. Your sister's apartment, her utilities, her kids' daycare. Should I keep going? The crowd had dispersed, but a few people lingered awkwardly, pretending to check their phones. Can we not do this here? She whispered harshly. No, Jessica. Let's do it right here. Because apparently, this is where you do your truth-telling. Her face twitched. You're blowing this out of proportion. I leaned in slightly. You don't get to decide the proportions anymore. For a second, I thought she might slap me. But instead, she squared her shoulders and said with a sneer, Fine. You want to act like the victim? Go ahead. But we both know you like being the one in control. You like playing the provider. I like believing it meant something, I said. I like thinking I mattered more than just my bank account. And with that, I stepped back. She didn't follow this time. I walked out the side gate without saying another word, the sound of my dress shoes on the pavement louder than any of the stunned murmurs behind me. Back home in Plano, the house looked expensive and empty, a monument to a partnership that had never really existed. I didn't go upstairs. I made up the couch, loosened my tie, and lay there in the silence, staring at the ceiling. That party was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it was an obituary for my delusion. And for the first time in years, I wondered how much of my marriage had been real and how much had been bought. That night, I didn't sleep. The couch in the den was too stiff, the silence too loud, and every breath felt like it had to earn its place. The party was hours behind us, but Jessica's words were still echoing, rich and convenient, bouncing off the high ceilings like a cruel reminder. I'd always thought of our home as something I built for us. White brick, navy shutters, wraparound porch, classic, clean. A backyard big enough for cookouts and birthday parties. Every room furnished with the idea of family in mind. And now? Now it felt like a staged house in a real estate listing. Elegant, yes, but soulless. Jessica never came down. Not to apologize, not to explain. Maybe she assumed I'd cool off and slide back into my role by morning. Provider, protector, pushover. But I couldn't unhear it. I sat there with a blanket across my knees, staring at the darkened ceiling fan and thinking back to the years I spent buying into an illusion. Her brother, Darren, the Mustang he wanted so badly it kept him up at night. I paid for it the week after his second DUI, convinced that a fresh start was worth 10 grand. Her sister, Layla, single mom with 2 toddlers. I'd co-signed her lease and covered 3 months of rent without hesitation. Jessica said, It's family, Mitch. It's what people do. And then there were her parents. I'd offered the house after her father lost his job at the factory. The mortgage went under my name because their credit couldn't hold up a coffee table. I never once asked for thanks. Just wanted her to feel secure. But lying there on that couch, it all began to feel lopsided. Not generous. Not noble. Stupid. Was I in love? Or was I just useful? The longer I sat in that silence, the more the house turned unfamiliar. The wedding photos on the mantel looked staged. The monogrammed towels in the master bath? Wasted initials. Even the scent of lavender from the automatic diffuser suddenly irritated me. Like the house itself was mocking me for thinking this was ever real. I got up, walked barefoot across the marble floor into the kitchen, opened the fridge just for something to do. There were the fresh herbs she ordered from that overpriced organic service. The specialty yogurts her sister liked when she came by unannounced. Wine from that vineyard her mother loved. Not one thing in there for me. I stood there with the cold air pressing into my face and finally admitted it to myself. This wasn't a marriage. It was a series of transactions disguised as love. And the worst part? I signed every receipt. 2 days later, I boarded a flight to Toronto without telling anyone. I left Jessica a note, not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want her calling the police thinking I'd vanished. Gone for a few days. Don't wait up. That was it. By the time I stepped off the plane, the weight in my chest had dulled, but it was still there, like carrying a suitcase full of memories you can't quite let go of. I rented a car, drove an hour north to a quiet suburb lined with maples already turning gold, and pulled up to a modest 2-story house that smelled like wood smoke and fresh bread. Calvin opened the door in a hoodie and socks, smiling like I hadn't dropped off the planet for 2 years. Still alive, huh? He said, pulling me into a half hug. Barely, I muttered, forcing a grin. Calvin and I went to college together. He was the loud, brilliant guy who pulled all-nighters with me before exams and drank black coffee like it was holy water. He'd moved to Canada after marrying a woman who later left him for a yoga instructor in Whistler. Now, he lived alone and taught design at a local university, happily unattached. The kitchen was warm, sunlight stretching across butcher block counters. There was a record spinning something soft, Fleetwood Mac, maybe, and the smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around the air like a blanket. So, he said, sliding me a mug. You look like someone who just watched his house burn down. I took a slow sip. You're not far off. Calvin sat opposite me, elbows on the table. Tell me what happened. Start at the top. And so I did. The party. The joke. Her words, rich and convenient. The way the room went cold. The years of bankrolling her family. The dawning realization that I'd been more investment than partner. He didn't interrupt. Just listened. When I finished, he sat back, whistled low. Man, that's brutal. But I gotta say, it's also kind of impressive. Impressive? I raised a brow. That you lasted this long without snapping. I chuckled. I guess that's something. Then came a sound I hadn't expected, laughter from another room. Light. Genuine. Unfiltered joy. A moment later, a woman stepped into the kitchen, tying her hair into a loose bun as she carried a basket of laundry. She was barefoot, wearing a faded blue sweater. Her presence didn't try too hard. It didn't have to. Oh, Calvin said. Mitchell, this is my cousin, Naomi. She's staying here a few weeks while her place is getting some renovations. She looked up at me, surprised but calm. Hey, she said, voice soft but clear. Didn't mean to interrupt the man talk. I nodded. No interruption. She smiled, and something about it, how unperformed it was, made me pause. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't calculated. It was just real. Naomi disappeared upstairs, and the kitchen fell quiet again, save for the scratch of the record. Calvin watched me with a smirk. What? Nothing, I said, sipping my coffee. But I was still thinking about that laugh. The way it filled the room without apology. Like someone who hadn't spent the last decade editing herself to fit a narrative. She's single? I asked, almost joking. Calvin grinned. You two might get along just fine. I was supposed to stay 3 days. But on the third morning, I found myself pouring another cup of coffee and texting my assistant to clear the rest of the week. Calvin didn't ask questions. He just handed me a pair of boots and said, You're going to need these if you're coming on the trail. That afternoon, we hiked through a trail just outside town, golden leaves crunching beneath our feet, branches overhead like stained glass windows. Naomi came too, walking just a few steps ahead of me, occasionally turning back to ask a question or make a comment that made me smile harder than I meant to. There was something about her. She spoke with this slow certainty, like she'd already thought through her words but never felt the need to rush them. She was quick-witted but kind. Curious, not performative. When she asked about my work, she actually listened. Not to be impressed, but because she wanted to understand. That evening, the three of us sat on the back deck, mugs of cider warming our hands, the sky bleeding orange over the trees. Naomi pulled her legs up under her sweater and said something about how she loved fall because everything felt honest in the cold. It stuck with me. The next day, Calvin had to teach late, and Naomi and I ended up walking into town on our own. The street was quiet, all family-owned shops and friendly nods from strangers. She ducked into a used bookstore while I grabbed 2 lattes from a cafe across the street. When I walked in with the cups, I found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an old paperback. She looked up and smiled like she wasn't surprised I'd brought coffee. Like she just expected the world to show up that way sometimes. I sat beside her. "So," she said, blowing on the lid, "do you always run away to Canada when things fall apart?" I smiled. "Only when Texas starts to feel colder than Ontario." She laughed again. That same sound. Effortless. We didn't talk about Jessica. Not directly. But Naomi had a way of drawing out the truth without making it feel like confession. She asked about my life, but not my marriage. Instead, she asked things Jessica never had. What made you choose your job? Do you actually like it? What did you want to be when you were 10? I told her things I hadn't said out loud in years. About sketching buildings in the margins of my notebooks. About wanting to design something permanent. Something that mattered. She listened. Eyes locked on mine, completely present. That night, I found her in the kitchen, brushing past me to grab a spoon, her shoulder grazing mine. It was nothing. Just a passing moment. But I felt it. The quiet thump of my pulse. The part of me I thought had shut off. And it wasn't about desire. It wasn't even about attraction. It was about absence. The ache of something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until I felt it, briefly, in the way her presence filled a room. We said goodnight like nothing was different. Like the day had been just another walk, just another cup of coffee, just another shared silence that lingered a beat too long. But when I lay down that night on Calvin's guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan humming above me, I didn't think of Jessica once. I thought of Naomi's laugh, and how it didn't ask me to earn it. Dallas was warmer than I remembered, or maybe it was just that the cold inside me had started to thaw. I landed late on a Thursday, drove home with the windows cracked, letting the rush of city noise remind me where I came from. The house was just as I'd left it, immaculate, expensive, and empty. Jessica wasn't home when I arrived. No note, no text, just silence. Friday afternoon, I got an invitation. One of her friends, Natalie, I think, was hosting a get-together at their place in Highland Park. Casual drinks. No pressure, just old friends catching up. The kind of thing we used to attend as a couple, her clinging to my arm like a prize she'd won at auction. I almost said no. But then I remembered Naomi's laugh, and how it made me feel human again. So I said yes. The party was tasteful, subdued. Wine flowing, low jazz in the background, people laughing a little too carefully, like they were afraid of being the next headline in someone's gossip column. Jessica was already there when I arrived. She wore a deep green dress that fit her like a tailored answer. Her makeup was flawless, her posture controlled, but when her eyes landed on me across the room, something in her stiffened. Just for a second, I nodded politely. For most of the evening, we circled each other like weather systems. I stayed near the kitchen, talking with a couple of mutual acquaintances, keeping my tone light. Jessica flitted from group to group, her voice high and cheerful, laughter always a second too loud. Then it happened. Someone, Natalie again, I think, raised a glass and made a joke about love and timing and keeping your options open. A throwaway line, harmless enough. But Jessica couldn't help herself. She raised her glass, smiled wide, and said loud enough for the room to hear, "Don't let your husband stop you from finding love, ladies." A few chuckles. A few widened eyes. She looked pleased with herself. And without missing a beat, I replied, "Funny. My wife didn't stop me either." The room went still. No laughter. No witty follow-up. Just the clink of someone setting their drink down and the long, collective silence that happens when everyone suddenly realizes they're part of a moment. Jessica's face froze. Her lips parted slightly, as if searching for a comeback, but nothing came. Not even a scoff. Just silence. Her glass hovered in midair, the wine inside trembling like her composure. I took another sip, nodded politely, and turned back to the conversation like nothing had happened. A minute later, I felt her hand on my arm. "In the kitchen," she hissed. "Now." We stepped away from the crowd. The room behind us buzzed nervously, but no one followed. The door clicked shut, and then it was just the two of us, standing under soft pendant lighting in someone else's designer kitchen. "What the hell was that?" she snapped. I shrugged. "Just a joke. You used to like those." Her voice dropped. "You embarrassed me." "No," I said calmly. "You embarrassed yourself." I just answered in kind. She set her glass down with a clatter. "You want a divorce, Mitchell? Is that where this is going?" I met her eyes. "It's already in motion. You'll find the paperwork on your nightstand." She blinked. "And one more thing," I added, my voice still low, steady. "Every gift I gave your family, every car, every check, every property in my name, I'll be legally pursuing recovery on all of it." Her face paled. "You're kidding." "No, I'm not." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her jaw clenched. She tried to hold her ground, but I could see it. The cracks, the panic behind her eyes, the sound of her sister's laughter, her brother's engine revving, her parents drinking wine on their porch, all of it suddenly on the chopping block. I didn't wait for her next line. I walked out of the kitchen, picked up my coat, nodded at our hosts, and left. The Texas night was warm, but I could feel the chill behind me, rising in that house like the first draft of a storm. The next morning, I was up early. Not because I couldn't sleep, quite the opposite. For the first time in a long time, I slept straight through the night. There's a kind of peace that comes after you stop trying to fix something that was never yours to heal. I was halfway through my coffee, barefoot in the kitchen, when the doorbell rang. Twice. I already knew who it was. I opened the door to find her parents, Doug and Marianne, standing on the porch, faces tight with panic. Doug looked disheveled, like he hadn't shaved or slept. Marianne's makeup was hastily applied, like she'd put it on in the car. She was clutching a printed letter in her hand, like it was radioactive. "Mitchell," she said, not even waiting to be invited in. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting them in. "Coffee." They followed me to the kitchen without answering. Jessica wasn't downstairs yet, probably still in bed, pretending this wasn't happening. I poured 2 cups, set them on the island, and waited. Doug slapped the letter on the counter. "We got this yesterday. Foreclosure notice. On the house." I nodded. Marianne's voice shook. "It says the mortgage holder is requesting full repayment, or else the property will be seized." That's not possible, Mitchell. You own that house." "I did," I said. "Legally, I co-signed the mortgage. I've initiated the release." Doug blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means I've notified the lender I will no longer be responsible for it. Ownership will revert to the primary occupant, pending a hearing." Marianne's hand went to her chest. "But that house was a gift. You said it was secure." "No," I said calmly. "Jessica said that. I signed paperwork. I paid the bills. I never called it a gift. You assumed." Doug leaned in, jaw tight. "You're punishing her. Through us." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm correcting a mistake. A long series of them." They stared at me, waiting for a crack, a softening, a Mitchell who would fix it all like he always had. But that man was gone. Jessica appeared a moment later, barefoot in a robe, eyes wide with sleep and tension. "What's going on?" Marianne turned to her, voice shrill. "Your husband is taking back the house." Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me. Her voice was softer now. "Fragile. This is a misunderstanding, right?" I shook my head. "No. It's clarity." Doug's face turned red. "You can't just throw us out of our home." "Why not?" I said. "I paid for it. I've been paying for it for years. Now I'm not." Jessica stepped forward. "We'll figure this out, Mitchell, please. Not like this. We can talk." "No," I said, picking up my coffee. "We had years to talk. You just never listened." Marianne was crying now, quietly, into a napkin she pulled from her purse. Doug looked like he wanted to scream, but didn't have the breath. Jessica took a step toward me. "Please, can we just go upstairs and talk? Just us." I looked at her. No anger, no fire, just something colder. "Final. This," I said, gesturing to the scene unraveling in our kitchen, "is what accountability feels like." She froze. No one spoke. Doug turned, muttering something under his breath. Marianne followed, clinging to his arm. Jessica didn't move. She stood there long after the front door clicked shut, still barefoot, still blinking. Like maybe if she stood still long enough, this would all start to rewind. It didn't. I finished my coffee, set the cup in the sink, and walked past her. For once, I didn't wait for her to follow. Night fell heavy. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it stings. That's the quiet we had now. The kind that fills every room with the echo of what's missing. Jessica hadn't spoken to me since her parents left in a storm of disbelief and hurt pride. She'd disappeared upstairs, slamming the door like that would somehow stop the walls from caving in. But they were already shifting. Every foundation I'd laid was cracking, by design. I stayed downstairs, sitting in the armchair by the fireplace with a glass of scotch, the bottle within arm's reach. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't turn on the news. I just sat there, letting the silence settle around me like armor. At exactly 10:23 p.m., her voice cut through the stillness. She was in the kitchen, not bothering to whisper now. "What do you mean it's gone?" she snapped. Her voice was high, tight. "What do you mean they just took it?" I didn't move, didn't make a sound. She paused, then hissed, "You're not listening, Darren. It was repossessed. Right out of the driveway. Some guy with a flatbed and a clipboard, just rolled up like it was any other Tuesday." Another pause. Her footsteps paced hard against the tile. "I don't know, okay? I didn't see it coming." Mitchell never said a word. I thought, her breath caught. I thought the car was paid off. Another beat of silence. I could practically hear Darren's panic radiating through the phone. "No, I'm not asking him. He's acting like a stranger lately. He barely talks to me. He didn't even look surprised when I told him about the house." I took a sip. So she was starting to see it. That slow unraveling. The one where you pull on one loose thread, and suddenly, the whole fabric of comfort begins to fall apart. "I'm trying," she whispered, more to herself than her brother now. "But it's like, I don't know this version of him." "You never did," I thought. She must have sat down, because the pacing stopped. Her voice came lower now, more strained. "Darren, you don't understand. He's not yelling. He's not even angry. He's just watching it all fall apart. And he's letting it happen." She paused again. Then her voice cracked. "No, he's making it happen." She hung up a few seconds later, though she stayed in the kitchen. I heard her open a drawer, close it softly. Then nothing for a while. Finally, she appeared in the doorway. Hair unbrushed. Wrinkled t-shirt. No makeup. She looked like a ghost of the woman who once lit up country clubs with her carefully packaged charm. Her eyes found me in the dim light. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked, voice flat. I looked at her. Not cold. Just tired. Like someone who'd seen the forecast and decided not to fight the rain. "What is there to say?" Her lips parted slightly, like she'd expected that to go differently. "You're punishing everyone," she said. "You're punishing my family." "I'm holding people accountable," I replied. "And unfortunately for you, that includes the ones you made rich off my name." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't argue. Not really. Because deep down, she knew. "I didn't ask for all of this," she said quietly. "You didn't stop it, either." She took a step back, like the words physically struck her. "You're not the man I married," she whispered. I stood, finished the last of my drink, and set the glass down. "No," I said. I finally realized that. She didn't follow me when I walked past her. She just stood there, in the doorway of a house that no longer belonged to her world, staring into the shape of a marriage she never really invested in, only borrowed from. And now the debt was being collected. The morning started too quietly. No calls. No slamming doors. Jessica didn't come down for coffee. The house felt like a paused movie, frozen somewhere between scenes. But I knew better. Storms don't start with thunder. They start with stillness. At 9:12 a.m., the front door burst open. Layla, Jessica's younger sister, stormed inside, holding a crumpled envelope in one hand and gripping her youngest child's wrist with the other. Her oldest trailed behind her, silent, eyes wide. Neither had shoes on. Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs in an oversized sweatshirt, eyes still swollen from sleep. "Layla," she called out. "What's going on?" Layla held the envelope up like it was radioactive. "This," she snapped, her voice shrill with panic. "This is what's going on." Jessica rushed down. What is that?" "An eviction notice," Layla said, waving the paper. 30 days. No warning. No explanation. I called the landlord. He said the leaseholder removed financial responsibility. That was you. Or Or Mitchell? I don't even know anymore. Jessica froze. Wait. No, there must be a mistake. That apartment is gone, Layla snapped. Unless I magically find $2,500 a month starting next week. The children stood like statues behind her. Confused. Embarrassed. Small. I was at the kitchen island, calmly stirring a second cup of coffee. Jessica looked at me, eyes wide. Did you do this? I didn't answer right away. Just took a long sip. Then I turned to Layla and said, you should ask your sister why. The room fell still. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. Layla looked from me to her. Jess. I didn't know. Jessica stammered. I thought he'd keep paying it. I didn't know he'd pull everything. You didn't know? Layla echoed. Her voice cracked. After everything he's done for us, you didn't know? I didn't think it would go this far, Jessica whispered. Layla laughed once. It wasn't a happy sound. Your husband gave me a roof. He kept me and the kids safe while I was picking up pieces you never even saw. And now it's gone because you thought he'd just keep writing checks forever? Jessica's face went pale. It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for, yes, I cut in quietly. You did. Layla stood there shaking, tears starting to fall. Her son clung to her leg. The younger one had no idea what was going on, but even she could feel the chill in the air. Jessica stepped forward. Mitchell, please. We can fix this. She has kids. You should have thought about that, I said, before you stood at a party and told the world why you married me. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Layla turned toward the door, ushering her children forward without another word. Wait, Jessica called out, trying to follow. Layla didn't look back. Jessica stood in the doorway, frozen again. Just like she had the night I walked out of that party. Still trying to make sense of the consequences that kept arriving like unexpected guests. And I just finished my coffee. The kitchen lights were off. The house didn't hum the way it usually did at night. No dishwasher cycle. No phone calls upstairs. Just the kind of stillness that follows collapse. I'd started another drink, but barely touched it. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. What I felt was stranger. A kind of clarity that didn't make me feel better. It just made everything unmistakably true. Jessica appeared in the doorway after dinner. No makeup. Slippers. An old sweatshirt that hung off her like it belonged to someone else entirely. She stood there a long time, silent. Then, quietly, she said, "Can we talk?" I nodded once. She crossed the room slowly and sat down across from me. Her eyes were puffy. She looked smaller somehow, like reality had started peeling layers off her and she hadn't figured out how to put herself back together. "I messed everything up," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. "I didn't mean what I said at the party," she continued. "It was a stupid joke. I was drunk, I was showing off, and I didn't realize I was about to blow everything to hell." Still, I stayed quiet. She shifted forward. "I know I've taken you for granted. I know that now. All of it. The house, the help, the cars, my parents, Layla, everything you gave, I treated like it would never run out." She paused, voice cracking. "But it did. And it's my fault." She looked at me then. Really looked. Like she was hoping to find something left. "I want to fix it." The words floated between us. And then she whispered, "Please." I set my glass down. "You don't fix this," I said softly. "You live it." Jessica blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means this isn't punishment. This is the price. The one I paid for years while you smiled through every transaction like love was a currency you could trade for comfort." Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. "I'll change, Mitchell. I'll go back to work. I'll help them, Layla, my parents. I'll start over if that's what it takes. Just, please don't leave me like this." I studied her. The desperation in her voice wasn't performative this time. It was real. But that didn't change anything. "You will go back to work," I said quietly. "You will help your sister. You will cover your parents' bills. You will pay for the car Darren can no longer drive and the house your mother thinks is still hers." Tears welled up, but she didn't blink them away. "And you'll do it without me," I finished. "Mitchell." "No," I said, leaning in. "This time, you're the safety net, not the one falling into it." She shook her head. "I'm not ready for that. You weren't ready to marry a man you saw as convenient either, but that didn't stop you." Silence. Heavy. Palpable. Jessica looked down at her hands, as if they held the answers. "They didn't. I never thought I'd lose you," she whispered. I nodded. "That's the problem." She looked up, eyes swimming. "Then what do I do now?" I stood slowly, voice even. Now you provide. Like I did. Without praise. Without thanks. Just because people are counting on you. Let's see how that feels. She broke then. Not dramatically. Not in some cinematic collapse. But in the quietest, most genuine way. Like someone whose foundation had finally rotted out from underneath her. Her head dropped into her hands. Her shoulders trembled. And for once, there were no words. No manipulation. Just consequence. I left her there. No parting shot. No dramatic exit. Some things don't need punctuation. They just end. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Muted colors, thick carpeting, no drama. Just hard chairs, dry voices, and the ticking reminder that justice doesn't care about theatrics. It just rolls forward, slow and absolute. Jessica sat 2 rows across from me, next to her lawyer. She didn't wear green this time. She didn't wear anything flashy. Just a plain black dress and a look that said she already knew the outcome. Because she did. Her lawyer tried. Spoke in circles about intent, about unspoken agreements, about emotional contributions that should count for something. Mine simply handed over the receipts. Mortgage co-signatures. Wire transfers to her family. Title histories for the car, the house, the apartment. The judge didn't need long. Mr. Walker, she said, flipping through the file, you retain primary control of all disputed properties and may initiate legal steps to dissolve financial obligations tied to your name alone. Just like that, it was over. Jessica didn't speak. Her lawyer nodded, whispered something to her, then packed up quietly. As I left the courtroom, she looked up once. Our eyes met, but only for a moment. There was no hate there, just resignation. Maybe even something like respect. But respect arrives too late when it has to be earned by the wreckage. 3 days later, Naomi landed in Texas. I picked her up from Love Field, her suitcase tiny, her smile warm. The sunlight streamed through the windshield as she buckled her seatbelt. I like the heat, she said. It's honest. I smiled. It doesn't apologize, that's for sure. We drove in easy silence. There was something about having her here, near the place where everything fell apart, that steadied me. Like I was no longer the only sane person in a madhouse. Like someone else could now see what I had survived. That night, we sat on the back porch of my house, and watched the Texas sky turn from rust to indigo. She rested her head against my shoulder, and I let my eyes close for a second. It should have felt like peace. But it didn't. Not completely. Because in the space Jessica left behind, there wasn't just clarity. There was quiet. And in that quiet, something stirred. Not regret. Not guilt. Just weight. The weight of what it took to win. I thought I'd feel lighter, I said aloud, surprising myself. Naomi looked up. But I feel like I walked out of a burning house with everything I owned, still smelling like smoke. She nodded slowly, then reached for my hand. You did what you had to do, she said. That doesn't make it easy. I squeezed her fingers, grateful. Still, in the corner of my mind, I kept replaying Jessica's face in that courtroom. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I doubted my choices, but because no one tells you what victory really feels like when it comes wrapped in ashes. The morning air had that crisp edge October brings to Texas, the kind of chill that doesn't last long, but reminds you change is always just one gust away. I pulled into the attorney's office just before 9. I didn't call ahead, didn't schedule a meeting. Some things don't require permission once you've made peace with the outcome. The receptionist offered coffee. I declined. I didn't need it. My hands were steady. When Carl, the attorney who'd guided me through every brutal legal step, appeared, he looked surprised to see me. Mitchell, he said, motioning to his office. Did we miss something? Not exactly, I replied. We sat across from each other, the weight of paperwork lining the shelves behind him like trophies from a war we both knew I'd won. I placed one document on the desk. The lease, I said. He glanced down, then back at me. Jessica's sister's apartment? Keep it in her name, I said. Void the removal. Transfer it over to Layla, or set it up as a silent trust. Just don't evict her. Or her kids. He studied me for a long second. You sure? Yes. Carl leaned back. You don't owe them that. I know. So why? I thought about it. About Layla showing up with tear-stained cheeks and 2 barefoot kids, waving an eviction letter that wasn't theirs to carry. About the way the boy had clung to her leg, watching the grown-ups argue, already understanding that life was fragile. Because they've paid enough, I said. Even if they didn't know they were paying. Carl nodded. I'll handle it. No signature needed. Just intent. And that was finally clear. I stepped outside into the Texas sun. It wasn't blinding. Just warm. The kind of warmth that doesn't ask for attention. I walked down the block slowly. No rush. For the first time in months, maybe years, my chest didn't feel tight. There was no battle left. No anger buzzing under my skin. Just a quiet sense of release. Naomi was waiting at the cafe down the street. She'd ordered 2 coffees already, one for her, one for me. She knew how I took it without asking. When I sat down, she gave me that look. The one that asked, "Did you do it?" I just nodded. She didn't say good. She didn't say why. She just reached across the table and touched my hand, like she already understood the kind of freedom you find when you stop needing someone else to lose. We sat there a long time. No past dragging at our heels. No future rushing us forward. Just the present. And for once, that was enough.